Thank you very much.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, a new report says anti-Asian hate crimes in 16 of America's largest cities increased by nearly 150% in 2020 compared to the previous year. That report by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino, looked at preliminary police data in major cities, which showed initial spikes of anti-Asian hate crimes reported in 2020 during March and April. The racial stereotyping and violence followed disinformation tied to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, local efforts are underway to motivate others to step in against discrimination. Joining us are Andy Kang, Executive Director of the nonprofit Asian Americans Advancing Justice Chicago, Professor Brian Levin, Director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino, and Tamer Abouzeid, staff attorney of CAIR-Chicago, a nonprofit Muslim civil rights organization. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Brian Levin, let's start with you, please. Your center surveyed police departments in several major cities and found an overall increase in anti-Asian hate crimes in 2020 compared to the year before. What do you see as behind this increase?
Thank you so much for having me, and a great question. I think there are two things behind it, and we've seen this happen again and again. One is a catalytic event or a set of incremental ones that identify a certain group as legitimate targets for aggression. But here's the thing, and we've seen this over the last decade or so in particular. Once we have that dry kindling, how a president responds to this condition makes a big difference. We saw hate crimes decline after President Bush spoke tolerantly of Muslims 6 days after 9/11. But conversely, what we saw with the terror attack on San Bernardino, a 23% increase above the level of hate crime that we saw from the terror attack when then candidate Trump spoke of a Muslim ban 5 days later. So I think it's a combination of two things. One, a catalytic event, and then how people of goodwill and leaders respond, because there's stereotypes and conspiracism all around.
Here, how does the pandemic play into what is happening, what you're seeing?
Brian is right, and we have reported hate incidents, and I want to use the word incident because not every traumatic experience rises to a level of evidence of a hate crime, right? But it's still very harmful to a community member. So we've seen over the last year over 80 reported incidents in Illinois. Certainly puts us in the top 10. That's a combination of hate incidents reported both by Advancing Justice Stand Against Hatred own tracker, but also a very successful California-based one, Stop AAPI Hate. And so we combine those numbers, so we know that this is happening even in Illinois, maybe not at the level in other parts of the country. And so we need to take action. And that's something that we've been partnering with CAIR-Chicago, with Tamer's organization, and a New York-based organization called Hollaback to bring what are called bystander intervention trainings. And this is very simple, hopefully easy to use, effective de-escalation tactics that anybody can use when they see another individual being targeted, either verbally harassed or, God forbid, that they're actually physically being harassed.
And Andy, I want to come back to some of that, the training that you just mentioned as well. But you know, Andy, I just want to ask you while I've got you, have you or anyone you've known personally experienced any anti-Asian sentiment?
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, I just recently learned that my aunt, who actually lives in Los Angeles in Koreatown, was attacked and had rocks thrown at her. I had a cousin who was on the road. He was living in Illinois and Chicago, but he was on the road down to Missouri, and he had another driver wave a gun at him. So, you know, this is very real. It's very personal for most of us in the Asian community. We know someone who has gone through this experience. And it's something that we just can't tolerate. And, you know, we're really inviting others to join us in standing against it.
And that's disturbing to hear, and I'm sorry that they've experienced that. Tamer, you know, we've heard Brian mention it. Is this racial scapegoating that's happening? Is it reminiscent of what we saw following 9/11?
Absolutely. It sounded very familiar to a lot of Muslim Americans when we heard about what was happening to the Asian and Asian American communities in the U.S. This idea that all of a sudden you wake up and you've suddenly become an enemy, you've suddenly become even more of an outsider, your neighbor may have turned against you, people are looking at you in suspicious ways. These are all things that the Muslim community saw in September 11th. And so this was really a natural thing to join up with Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Chicago, because we have learned some things and we had some things to share, and there's good news and bad news, right? We were able to say the good news is we have more resources right now. We've learned from what happened in the past. The bad news is, unfortunately, it doesn't disappear. But it can get a lot better, and we can deal with it a lot better, and we can teach folks how to deal with it, and just do the best we can.
And Tamer, if you would sort of discuss the scope of the intolerance that Asians may have seen in the past year, from microaggressions to outright violence.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's something really important too, because sometimes people just think of the stuff that really gets you at a visceral level, right? Like someone getting beaten up or something. But it can be something as little as people staring at you, people spitting, maybe not at you, but in your direction, right? People asking you, where are you really from? Where are you really from? Jokes even. People make jokes, right? And they think, oh, it's just a joke. Don't be so serious about it. But all these little things build up. And what we really try to tell folks in the training is that these things aren't isolated, and they often build up, where it starts with one thing that may seem like a lesser form of disrespect, and often it grows and grows, and sometimes cements itself in policy, where we end up even passing laws that are completely discriminatory against certain communities.
And Andy, just briefly, the importance of the bystander training, because a lot of folks may be a bystander and don't know how to handle it or how to respond.
And that's what we're trying to overcome, is folks freezing in the moment. They want to help, but they don't know what they can do that wouldn't make the situation worse. Certainly, we're not asking people to intervene physically and put themselves more in harm, right? So we want to give as much information to people so that do what they can to help mitigate some of these really terrible things that are happening in the community.
And Brian Levin, we've got about 20 seconds left. When the official hate crime FBI data for 2020 comes out later on, do you suspect we'll see an increase in these kinds of hate crimes and incidents?
Oh, well, we're totally, the question is not whether we're going to see an increase. This is a historic one, and we stand with our Asian friends and neighbors on this. The big question is, of the ones that we've classified just as crimes, are they getting reported to police? And if the majority do, we're not only going to see a probable century high, we may even see an all-time high for FBI reported hate crime. The record for that was in '96. Let's see. But this is going to be a pivotal year. We saw a rotation where, while hate crimes overall are down, attacks against Asian people are up at historic levels.
And unfortunately, that means we'll have to keep discussing this into the future. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Andy Kang, Brian Levin, and Tamer Abouzeid. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.